Well, good morning. My name is Tim Boswell. I'm a field safety coordinator for the public safety side of Evergy, and we're here at Evergy Energy Center, just south of the plant in the rolling prairies of the Flint Hills here. And our purpose today is to talk about preparing for prescribed burns where transmission and distribution structures are crossing landowners' property, and how to mitigate the fire load around those structures to prevent those structures from burning during those prescribed burns. I'm going to have Nick and Aaron introduce themselves, but pretty soon they're going to give you a short tour of the different types of techniques and strategies that we can use to prevent that fuel loading around those structures. Go ahead, Nick.
I'm Nick Kruger. I'm with Transmission Maintenance.
I'm Aaron Priest. I'm Lead Safety Coordinator for the Northwest region of Kansas.
So Aaron, this is a really good example of a lot of fuel load around a structure that we would be very concerned about in a prescribed burn. With all the brush and yeah, that's going to create a lot of heat and be pretty easy to catch this structure on fire and hard to keep it out.
Yeah, I think you're right, Nick. As you know, there's three really good strategies or techniques to remove that fuel load, and we actually got an example of one of them right over here. Mowing, I would say, is probably the least effective. You still got a little bit of fuel load, but coming from that fuel load around that leg, just looking how mowing significantly knocked down that fuel load around there, and it's critical. The size, how far you mow, how far you use the other strategy. 10 foot is kind of the minimum. 15 is better. So that 10 to 15 foot area around that structure will reduce that fuel load and give yourself a little bit of room there. Also on this one, this is a great example, the fireproofing material that we put on there. Sometimes folks will get complacent. That's on there, don't need to do anything about it, but that's a prime example. Over age, over time, the cows rubbing on it, hitting it with equipment, prior burns. That fireproofing material is virtually useless now. So, that's another thing to look at when you're out there around those poles.
Yep, I think it really looks good. I like how it's mowed out quite a ways. That's going to keep the heat and that fire load off of this structure. This looks way better than it does over there.
Yeah, Nick, we already kind of looked at the mowing to reduce fuel load. Here's another strategy. This takes the use of equipment, a disc, a plow, herbicides are another one. Our goal here is just to reduce that fuel load, get it down to bare dirt, but with the same technique as mowing, 10 feet is kind of the minimum, 15 feet is greater. This may not be applicable in every scenario. Maybe you can't get the equipment in there, the cost of herbicides, there's other things, but this is probably one of the better strategies. We just reduced or eliminated that fuel load completely.
Yep, I like it. You don't even have any risk of fire getting to the structure at all.
And I got one more example up the hill. Let's go check it out.
Okay, let's do.
Nick, this is the last example I got. But just our experience of burning out here, this is probably the most effective, the burning. Go out and burn around your structures, depending on, your wind and where you want that fire to go, you can let it go from there, but this is probably the most effective. You're out here to burn, you have the equipment, oftentimes you got plenty of manpower that you can come out here and burn around, and this is actually a really good example. If you look over this way though, this one we didn't get all the way burnt. So, we still have that fuel loading on that side. Did get up a little bit around the pole, but we'd like to see that just like the other examples, 10 or 15 feet around that pole. It was really great over here, but this is a poor example because we left one side of that structure exposed to fire.
Yep, Aaron, I really like this. I think something to kind of keep in mind when you're burning, when you get some cracks in the poles, and sometimes those embers will get inside those cracks, and the landowner will think they did their due diligence in making sure it was out and it wasn't bothering anything. They'll come back a couple days later and the structures burn up. So I guess as you're burning, just pay close attention to make sure on those big cracks that that you don't have any hot embers or anything in there. And this example right here is a great way to keep any of them embers out of them cracks and burning it up.
That's a great point. Great point, Nick.
So this crack's a good example of a good place for an ember to get in. You can get done burning and come by and check this structure. You'll think it's all out. You might come back a day or two later and you'll see that half of this pole's burn up, and that's just from an ember getting in there and not knowing it. So you really got to pay close attention to those, and some of these will even be quite a little bit bigger.
So here's another example of the crack where Nick talked about earlier. You know, you see all this fuel loading around there. This catches fire, embers get embedded inside that pole. Actually, the inside of that pole could start on fire and radiate through the top of the pole. All right, here's an example of fireproofing material that you see a lot of times around the poles. It's false sense of security. Over time, as you can tell by this one, it gets damaged, either from fires previous. Just over time they deteriorate, and it's pretty much useless now. Here's an example of some pretty decent fireproofing still left on this pole. It's a newer structure, but as you can see in some spots it's starting to separate, and you got a few little peekaboos there where a fire could start on that pole. So just because it's there doesn't mean that it's 100% effective.